I can see a couple of people bringing their tea back, which is really nice. It's one of the lovely things, isn't it, being at home and you can just go and get your cup of tea and just relax. I think I loved Kalyanidi's metta practice and this sort of emphasis on relaxation. And so hopefully we can just continue that throughout this evening. And just to say a big welcome to anybody who's joined us. I know there's a few of you have joined since Kalyanadi was welcoming people. So lovely to have you here at Sangha Night. And yeah, fantastic. There's 46 of us here. What a wonderful thing. 46 of us wanting to be here together. Interested in the Buddhism, in the Dharma, in the Sangha. And so, yeah, so lovely, welcome. And so we're here for the second part of exploring the parable of the burning house. So last week, for anybody who missed it, Kalyanadi gave a beautiful talk. I thought she evoked the parable really beautifully. And I think there's something about parable and story, isn't it, that you can just sort of take in. It's just a different way of hearing something that we can be incredibly receptive to on so many levels. And so hopefully I can just evoke something again from about the parable and just tell you a story. So just relax and enjoy it. One of the things that Bhante Sangha says about this, and I'll just show you the book, a brilliant book that from Sangha is called The Drama of Cosmic Enlightenment. And this is a commentary on the White Lotus Sutra, and that's where the parable of the burning house comes from. Now, we can't get into the centre at the moment, but there's a few hard copies at the centre for when we're open again, if you can hang on. Kalyanadi's nodding her head. And if not, you can get it, one of these e-books through Windhorse Publications. But if you're fascinated by this parable and the White Lotus Sutra, I strongly, strongly recommend it. So one of the things that Bhante actually says is, when you listen to the story, don't think, don't try to work it all out. Absorb it as if you're watching a film in darkness. And I thought that was so evocative, when you're watching a film in darkness and you can become totally absorbed in the story, you sort of become part of it. And I think that's what this parable is inviting. So absorb it as if you're watching a film in darkness. And allow yourself to feel. Bhante says, it really encourages, allow yourself just to feel as you listen to it. So to start with, just to say a little bit about the White Lotus Sutra. So this was written down long after the Buddha's death, because at the time of the Buddha, it was an oral tradition. So it's a long time. It's sort of around the 1st century of this CE, around that time it was written. It's one of the earliest Mahayana sutras, and it signals a radical sort of change in a teaching style. So it's got its own sort of language. It starts to be this language of poetry. It's trying to evoke things. It's trying to evoke things like memory, vision, emotion, imagination. So it's trying to bring them out through this sort of poetic language. And we might wonder, well, why was that needed? And some of the thinking around this is that without the Buddha's presence, that the Dharma teachings have sometimes perhaps got a bit lacked this sort of emotional quality, or became a bit more dry. Whereas when you had the Buddha around, we hear of people being enlightened on the spot in the presence of the Buddha. And, he's utterly compassionate and utterly wise. You've got this Buddha around. But over time, the teaching's being passed along. And perhaps it was like something else was needed. Something else was needed. And the other thing was to really bring out that we're not, enlightenment in itself is a wonderful thing to attain for oneself. But even beyond that is attaining enlightenment for the sake of all beings. So committing yourself to this sort of path of you want all beings to be enlightened with you, to go beyond suffering together. So that's that's a bit about the White Lotus Sutra. And this parable is said to have been spoken up on Vulture's Peak. So you've got this, if you imagine in the times of the Buddha, there's all this flat land, but there's this big craggy outcrop that's jutting up, and that you can see for miles and miles from it. And if we imagine, this sort of story of the Buddha on Vulture's Peak, what that might be like. And it's said that Vulture's Peak is halfway between heaven and halfway between hell. A bit not between hell, between the earth and heaven. And here, listening to the Buddha, you've got all of these beings have gathered, and it said there's 12,000 arhats, so enlightened beings. So 12,000 arhats, 80,000 bodhisattvas, so beings who are absolutely committed to enlightenment for the sake of all beings, for the benefit of all beings. And you've got tens of thousands of gods and non-human beings. You've got all these beings, this vast audience, listening to the Buddha. And it's said that he gives them a teaching, and that flowers fall, the flowers fall as the Buddha teaches, and everyone is just in this sort of beautiful meditative state in the presence of the Buddha. And during a meditation, the Buddha goes into this really, really deep meditation. And it's said that out of his third eye, these beams of light come out and they show up these innumerable world systems, each of which has a Buddha in, and all of the disciples. The Buddha's teaching the disciples. And people are wondering what's going on. What is going on? Can you imagine seeing innumerable worlds? And Manjushri, a bodhisattva, he says, I think that the Buddha's going to expand the White Lotus Sutra. And so the Buddha then teaches, he says to the people there, to everybody present, that so far he's taught this teaching that can bring you to enlightenment, but there's more than that. There's more than just enlightenment for oneself. And at that point, it's too much for some of the arhats to hear. And 5,000 of them apparently get up and walk out. And they think, what else is there to learn? What else could there be to learn? And this is what the White Lotus Sutra is getting at. So what more is there to learn? And the Buddha says that only a Buddha can fully understand the truth, and that everybody else has to go step by step, and that he has to teach in these sort of stages of readiness. So when you're ready, you can really hear this next teaching. But because some people understand, Manjushri says, well, can you help us understand what you're talking about? And this is when the Buddha gives this parable of the burning house. Because he says a parable can help intelligent beings understand. So the story starts off. One of the things Kaliana D talked about last week was about coming into this from a different perspective, dreaming your way into this parable, and imagining your way in. So the story starts with this vast decaying house, and it's crumbling. And Kaliana D talked a lot about this last week, and if you want to hear more about the symbolism of that, please do listen to that talk. So there's this large decaying house. It's falling apart. There's lots and lots of people inside, lots of children, all the servants. And there's this very wealthy owner who owns this house, but somehow has let it go into decay. It's as if nobody's noticing that the house is decaying. Nobody's taking care of it, of this house. But at some point, the elder gets outside of the house. He's outside, looking back at the house, so to speak. And at this point, the house is said to set on fire. And it sets on fire, and every part of it all at once, all around the edges, it's like this fire's just blazing up. And this elder is looking at the house and seeing that the house is on fire. And what has happened is this sort of dire situation of this crumbling house became urgent and now has become like an emergency. It's now an utter emergency. And I wonder if we can sort of feel into, what would it be like being the elder? You've got out of this house, the burning house, and you know that everybody else is inside it. What would that be like? The sort of that pull to go inside and rescue them, to help them. How do you get them out? The desire would be overwhelming, wouldn't it? To help. Just imagine that. But the children inside, they're oblivious, they're lost in their play, they're just caught by all these toys that they're playing with. They're unaware, of what's going on around them. They can't see that there's a problem here. So they just carry on playing. What is it like to be like the children, sort of, we're just caught up in what we're doing. We don't notice what's really going on. But the elder knows he's got to get them out, so he calls. And he's calling out, you need to get out, it's dangerous in the house. The house is on fire, but no one listens. They can't hear, they just can't sort of hear the message that the elder's shouting. And what is that trying to get at? No one listens. They just carry on playing with their toys. But the elder's seeing something they just can't see yet. So the elder thinks, I could carry them out one by one. And but how long would that take? Many of them are going to perish. So then he thinks, what can I do? How am I going to get them out of the house? So it comes into his mind that what he can do is call them out by saying, there's some toys outside that they've longed for all of their lives. And there's an ox cart, a goat cart, and a deer cart. And for those children, they were the things they'd always wanted. The best possible toy you could ever imagine. So when they hear this, they're suddenly awake. It's like he's suddenly got their attention. Maybe we can imagine that ourselves, when your ears prick up, when something catches your attention. And they rush out, they scramble out, pushing each other as they're coming out of the door. They can't get out fast enough because they want these carts. So then they're outside of the house. And so can we imagine, what the elder feels like at that point? You know, I feel it in my being, you know, it'd be like utter relief, wouldn't it? Oh, it's like, oh my gosh, everyone's safe. You know, they're all out of the house. How frightening that would be until that point. And the children, they arrive outside of the house and then they're sort of awake, they're out of danger. And then, but their main interest is, well, where are these carts? You know, where are these carts? You promised us these carts. But the carts that they promised, that the elder promised, aren't there. But instead, there's these carts. They're carts beyond any sort of possibility of them ever imagining them. That not in their wildest dreams could these children ever have imagined these carts. So they're said to be like pure white ox, and they're sure-footed, and they're able to travel like the wind, you know, so as fast and as smooth as the wind. And the carts have got these beautiful canopies and bells and jewels. They're just the most amazing carts that you know, that you could ever possibly imagine. So the elder has given these children something that they couldn't possibly ever have believed was possible. And that's what the Buddha is trying to convey in this story, that there's something there that we couldn't possibly imagine, but he knows what it is. You know, the elder in a sense is the Buddha, and the children in a sense are us. So the elder is the Buddha trying to help us get to safety, not satisfied with enlightenment for himself. You know, this is getting more into the meaning of it. Wanting all beings to be safe. And he sees that attached to conditioned things we suffer. And we suffer because all things change. You know, that's what the parable's getting to, isn't it? You know, with this decaying house. And that all things are changing all of the time. And when the conditions for those things aren't there any longer, these things cease being. You know, or if the conditions aren't there, they don't come into being. But absorbed in things, in these conditioned things, we often don't see what's going on around us. This is the story. And we're sort of staying in the burning house. Yeah, so I think it's getting at, we all have the conditions we need to attain enlightenment. We have the Buddha's teachings, you know, we have the conditions we need. We've got the Sangha. And it's there if we can only just see it or hear it. And I was thinking about how the call, you know, the call, when the elder's calling and the children can't sort of hear to start with. You know, I was thinking, you know, there's like this voice or something, there's a voice, and it's trying to communicate something to us. And I think it can be like our own inner voice, like something in us is calling us. And, you know, do we listen? Do we listen to that voice? You know, that, and I think with the pandemic, you know, I think it's really sort of showing up change, you know, how we, you know, who'd have thought a year ago we would be in this situation, you know, and it's sort of, yeah, can we see that? And can we hear a voice calling us? So I'm just going to end with Bhante. I'm just going to read something he says, which I think is absolutely sort of spot on for this parable. So he said, the Buddha nature is not outside us, but within us. We could say there's not just an Ananda outside. Now, Ananda was the Buddha's attendant for many, many years. And he memorized all of the Buddha's teachings and told them again and again. And he was said to validate the Buddha's teachings. He'd say, this was what the Buddha taught, because he could remember everything. So we could say that there's not just an Ananda outside, like a historical being, yet in the realm of history. There's also an Ananda inside us. And just as the historical Ananda listened to the Buddha, so the Ananda inside us hears the voice of truth within. Ananda, we could say, is our own ordinary mind, listening to the utterance of our own enlightened consciousness. So I don't know if that's sort of what that communicates to you. I'm just going to read it again. So the Buddha's nature is not outside us, but within us. We could say there's not just an Ananda outside in the realm of history. There's also an Ananda inside us. And just as the historical Ananda listened to the Buddha, so the Ananda inside us hears the voice of truth within. Ananda, we could say, is our own ordinary mind, listening to the utterance of our own enlightened consciousness. So there's something about our inner, that inner knowing that I think this parable's trying to get at. So I finished a bit earlier than I thought, but that's going to give us some good period of time just to explore some questions. So I'm going to read these questions out, but your people on the team have all got the questions written down. So you could just think about these while I'm saying them, just see if there's anything there that you might feel sort of drawn to or interested in, that you might want to explore in your group. So do you forget how ephemeral and impermanent all conditioned things are? Do you forget that? That all things, conditioned things, they're ephemeral and impermanent. And has the pandemic shaken the rafters of your house? It's a sort of metaphorical question. What does that say to you? Has it shaken the rafters of your house? And another question is your inner voice calling to you? Can you hear it? Maybe it's a whisper, or maybe it's louder. Can you listen to it? And another possibility to explore is, what are our toys? What are the toys we get lost in? What catches us? It could be iPhones or TV, or what is it? I think how I can get drawn into just watching the news, just wanting to know more and more, rather than perhaps going and meditating or reflecting. I can get lost in it. But when you get lost in your toys or the things that distract you, what brings you back? So when you get lost, what brings you back? And it could be things like, well, what brings you here tonight? What is it? What can you hear? We think of the sound of the elder talking to the children. Okay, so we'll go into groups, and we're going to have probably 20-25 minutes actually. We'll finish the groups at 9 o'clock, and yeah, and just explore away. And do feel free in your groups just to say hi to each other. If you don't already know each other, just say hi. We've got lots of time this evening, lots of spaciousness. So happy exploring.